There are a lot of buffs and debuffs in Destiny. Rifts, Wells, Weapons of Light is back, Melting Point, Flawless Executioner, Shadow Shot, Tractor Cannon. So what stacks with what? That's what I'm going to be showing you guys today, similar to how I did it for Destiny 1. Spoilers, if you watch that video, it's essentially the same. We're going to start with the Warlock, who has the most tools to buff your team. Empowering Rift for starters, and new with Forsaken, the Guiding Flame empowered melee attack, and Well of Radiance. Individually, Empowering Rift is a 25% boost to weapon damage, Empowered Melee is also 25%, while Well of Radiance is 35%. So where do things stack? The only thing that stacks together here is Well of Radiance and the Guiding Flame melee attack. You cannot drop an Empowering Rift inside of a well and expect it to work. You also cannot stack the Empowered Melee effect on an Empowering Rift. If you have the Empowered buff from the melee attack and step into an Empowering Rift, the game will just rip the buff right off of you and give you Empowering Rift instead. The effects of stacking Well of Radiance and the Empowered Melee, and all other buffs, are multiplicative, not additive. That means it's not just 35 and 25% added together. Rather, the effects are multiplied, resulting in a gain of 68.7% weapon damage when those two things are stacked. For fun, let's throw a debuff into the mix, where we now have Tractor Cannon. Tractor Cannon on its own debuffs an enemy to take 50% more void damage for a brief time, while arc and solar damage are increased by 33%. Let's try Well of Radiance with an Empowered Melee and Tractor Cannon, and we'll put them all together, and yeah, that's a pretty big increase in damage. We went from 8,310 damage on a hand cannon headshot to 18,692. That is a 125% increase with those three effects applied. What about Weapons of Light? Yes, Weapons of Light is back, giving a 25% damage increase to your team. The only difference is that you need to have someone hold up their Sentinel shield for said damage increase. Is that worth it? Well, we'll talk about that in a video coming up soon. Anyway, Weapons of Light, what does it stack with? Well of Radiance? Yep. Well of Radiance and Empowered Melee? Also yeah. We go from 1,370 damage per shot on my pulse rifle to 2,889, an increase of 111%, and that's without a debuff either. There is also another buff on the new Striker Titan, Inertia Override, where you gain a 20% damage buff after sliding into ammo. While this does exist, in a raid setting, I think this is a little too conditional of a buff to ever really need to watch out for it. In a strike setting, you'll probably see it a little bit, but with the value that Sentinel and Sunbreaker bring in terms of their buffs and debuffs in the raid, I think use of this buff will be uncommon. Let's talk debuffs, because not all of them play nice. In fact, none of them play nice with each other at all. There are two categories of debuffs: damage debuffs and suppression debuffs. Suppression debuffs are things like Tractor Cannon, Shadow Shot, and to a much lesser extent for the purposes of this video, Suppression Grenade. Shadow Shot increases damage taken by anything tethered by 35%. Then you have your pure damage debuffs, which are Melting Point, also known as Hammer Strike in Destiny 2, it's called Melting Point in Destiny 1, and Flawless Executioner, new with Forsaken, also known as Hunter Melting Point. Melting Point and Flawless Executioner both place a debuff on a target that causes them to take 50% increased damage for a brief time. Melting Point has a bit of an easier application process, but Flawless Executioner can be done without the need of an ability cooldown. However, much like it was in Destiny 1, you can't just stack all of these debuffs at the same time and blow something up. Certain debuffs get priority over others. For example, Melting Point and Shadow Shot do not stack with each other. Shadow Shot will actually overtake Melting Point, probably due to its suppression effect, which the game values as stronger. While this is fine for large groups of enemies, against individual bosses, you should let Melting Point be applied first if available, then use the tether if you have nothing else. Flawless Executioner is essentially the same thing as Melting Point and is also overridden by Shadow Shot. Tractor Cannon will also overwrite Melting Point and Flawless Executioner, even though it only gives a 33% damage boost to arc and solar damage. Basically, an enemy can only have one debuff applied to it at a time. If you're fighting against a boss, Melting Point or Flawless Executioner should be the priority. Tractor Cannon does end up taking someone out of the fight in terms of actually being able to deal damage, similar to Weapons of Light, and yes, we will also cover in another video if it's worth having a Tractor Cannon around in the raid. Anyway, that is approximately all you need to know about buffs and debuffs in Destiny 2. Again, it's pretty similar to Destiny 1, where you can stack a lot of individual buffs on your character, but debuffs on the enemy are limited to one at a time, and suppression debuffs will take priority over damage debuffs. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.